Okay, so now we're going to turn to systemic barriers as a topic. And now each candidate will get the same question and have 1 minute to answer. Um, we'll start with Nichelle. And the question is, if you could remove one barrier in California's education system tomorrow, what would it be? And what is stopping us from doing it now? Nichelle?
The barrier that I see is standardized testing, the high stakes nature of standardized testing. We don't use the assessment data for anything because if we did, we wouldn't have a system of social promotion. Um, that barrier is an equity issue. So we have students that are matriculating from grade to grade, not demonstrating mastery of the state standards or the Common Core standards, but we place such a high stakes nature on the outcome of the test where we are punitively blaming teachers and blaming our school districts when the testing itself is contrary to what we say our priorities are in terms of student learning and student outcomes. And so the idea is to reform the way that we assess our students, the way that we utilize that data, and the way that we allow teachers to teach in our classrooms, teaching for understanding long-term learning versus to a test.
Thank you. Next is Richard.
Well, I really appreciate Michelle's answer to that, and I do think we've gotten trapped in this system of standardized testing, and I think it comes from a punitive place, and so opening up our definition of the outcomes that we're trying to achieve for our students. For instance, the indicator on the dashboard of college and career readiness is so much more important an indicator than once a year standardized testing because that's a question of are our students when they come through our system are they prepared to succeed in the world in college or career or both. So I think a lot more emphasis on outcomes and metrics that actually affect young people's lives than these standardized test scores, which is all about a kind of a style of corporate management, reduce the definition of education to something that's simply easy to manage. That's where that comes from. And it's never worked, and it doesn't actually increase test scores. But meanwhile, when we focus on engaging our young people around relevant curriculum and opportunities, that's when we see students thrive.
Thank you. Next, we'd like to hear from Al.
Yes, well, I'm not sure if I'm answering the question the way you want me to answer it, but if there's one change that I would make, in an aspirational sense, I mean, it's poverty, right? It's you know, public schools exist to provide equal educational opportunity for all, regardless of who you are, regardless of where you live. And yet we know that we have the opportunity gaps, the achievement gaps, largely based on income. And so that's why, my first term in the legislature, I championed the local control funding formula to get more funding to students with the greatest needs. That's why I've been championing programs like community schools, expanded learning opportunities to get more after-school opportunity programs, championing early childhood education. We know that the biggest opportunity gap exists in those 0 to 5 years for our low-income families. And so, I'm going to continue to champion getting more program support resources to the students with the greatest needs.
Thank you. Next, we have Anthony.
I think the greatest obstacle and what I would like to see eliminated, again, in an aspirational sense, is to eliminate funding disparities based on particularly based on local property taxes, and also to provide equity, to have the state provide equity through funding models that give more to school districts that have less. I think part of what should be considered in that equation is not only the local property taxes, but also what local school districts are able to contribute. If you think about my daughter's school district, I've volunteered upwards of 50 some hours this week. I have the ability to do so. I'm right around the median in terms of the volunteer hours. I know in a lot of working class districts, I know in a lot of districts where people have to commute long distances, that's not the case. So my daughter's public school district, has a lot of advantages that other school districts don't have. One of the reasons that we have this inequity is because of Proposition 13 that needs to be done.
Thank you. Now we can hear from Frank, please.
Thank you. The one issue and aspiration would be lower classroom sizes. As simple as it sounds, constantly districts are having to battle locally around potentially reducing by 1 student, 2 students, and the cost is in the millions, sometimes tens of millions, to do that across the district. And the fact that we haven't, as the 4th largest economy in the world, again, the per pupil funding being less than 30, like at the bottom 30, the fact that we haven't as a state invested to really transform education, where you're having, again, 15 to 18 students in the lower grades, you're having no more than 25 students in the upper grades. The profession itself has consistently been, for the last 10 years, 50% of educators leaving after 7 years. I mean, whatever way you look at it, investment, money, cost of people's time to come into this profession, and the loss of professionalism due to the high levels of stress. If we actually had a chance to have low classroom sizes where an adult was meeting the needs of our students, then we can truly transform education.
Thank you. Gus, please go ahead.
Man, this is tough going right after Frank, because I also would say the number one thing that I would point to is actually class sizes. That's why in my book, where I laid out what my platform would be, one of the first things I addressed was, here's how you can actually restructure the funding formula, the concentration in the supplemental grants, to shift future growth in the budget to help lower class sizes, because that actually is I think the way that you actually change the performance of the system, which, by the way, the performance of the system, you know how the system is doing because of the standardized tests. They are not a goal, they are just a measurement tool. And yes, the results that they tell you are often depressing. I quoted some earlier, some of those results. But getting rid of the tests themselves is just shooting the messenger. That's not what we should do. It's lowering the class sizes because this is a human problem and it requires a human solution. That means bodies, more teachers. And as the class sizes go down, then it actually will be possible, as Frank mentioned, for teachers to feel like they're more empowered, to have a better quality of life in their job, which will help retain our teachers in the profession. We are losing a huge fraction of them in just 3 to 5 years. So lowering the classes is the way to address that. There is a way to do it without having to raise taxes by repurposing the future growth. I laid out the mechanics of that in my platform, and I will work with the legislature to try and make that happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll have Josh answer this question.
Right. So interesting answers from everybody. I guess let me build on or give a variation on Al's answer. And I think one of the biggest barriers facing California's students and families is kind of always hiding in plain sight. And that's the lack of alignment between the school day and the work day in California. And the fact that school goes from 8 to 2:30, sometimes 8 to noon on Wednesdays, creates massive stresses among working families. We have so many families. We have a single parent household or dual learner households working so hard to make ends meet in this high cost of living state. And we know the answer is out there, is to make sure that schools provide, sort of education and opportunities for enrichment throughout the whole workday. And expanded learning opportunities programs have been a great sort of demonstrator of the benefit of these programs. And so the governor should be credited for allocating more money last year to do that. Every school should provide that level of service, either directly or with partners in their neighborhoods.
Thank you.